One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to be painting a bones figure this afternoon. Let's get the camera all up and running. There we go. We have a palette. There we go. We've just spilled stuff all over the table. Very cool. We have our camera up and running. Let's get zoomed in a little bit better. Hopefully without causing all kinds of illnesses. All right, so we're doing something a little bit simpler than usual today. We're going to keep it really basic. This is Olivia from Reaper Miniatures, and we're doing two things today. We're going to do the skin tones, and we're going to put a little bit of time and effort into painting the face, and we are going to do brown robes. Brown is a color that a lot of people default to when they're starting to learn to paint. And it's a good place to start. And I just realized we haven't done very much of that in this painting series, so we're going to do some very basic brown robes for Olivia. Now we've got a cool base here. This is one of the new bases that Aaron Lovejoy has been sculpting for, and you can buy them through the Miniature Monthly website. And what it is the bases are 3D printed, but they have an integral magnet. So when you have your figure and you want to put them in your storage trays or whatever, there's a magnet already inside the base.
Did that just happen? Oh my gosh, you gotta be kidding me. That is not supposed to happen. The magnet's not supposed to fall out and resin just pour out of the base. Anyways, we've got a fix for it. When we do release these bases, that will not happen. But the magnet will be inside so it doesn't fall out. We'll get it. All right. On with the video.
And they'll stick to your, see if I can find one which is not painted. They'll stick in the movement trays. There we go. Well, this is what they look like. And they come in a bunch of different sizes, and they have integrated magnets in them. And they'll stick to your metal tray. Yeah, they're kind of cool. So we're going to use those fairly often from now on, just because this is the Miniature Monthly channel. And that's what we're going to do. So here, let's get back to talking about Olivia. So we're going to start out by putting a base coat over all the brown. And then we're going to do a bit of a base coat on the skin. Let those dry, and then we're going to do some strong highlighting. And the idea is going to be that Olivia is walking through the Egyptian ruins or wherever it is she's working, and the light is going to be shining on her from her left, from our right. So we're going to highlight everything so the light is shining on her this way. And we'll do a nice strong light and shadow contrast on her. So I'm going to start out with a fairly big brush today. As usual, I'm trying to break in a new brush. I wreck my brushes pretty frequently. I'm going to be using this Winsor & Newton size 2. It's never been used before, so hopefully I don't wreck it right away. But the idea is to break this brush in slowly. And I'm going to use a fairly large brush, so I have lots of time to work on the model. If I paint with a tiny little brush, like that, okay, I don't have as much paint on the brush, and I have to keep reloading, and kind of slows things down a bit. And I find that a nice big brush, nice big belly on the brush with a good point on it, I can get quite a lot of work done quite quickly. All right, that's the plan. The colors we're going to use for today, we're going to do brown robes. So I'm going to use Reaper's Warm Brown series. We're going to start with earth brown as our base color. I'm going to work our way up through leather brown, amber gold, golden yellow, golden blonde. And depending, we might do a little bit of highlighting with creamy ivory, but maybe not, where we want this to look more brown than yellow. And then for the skin tones, I'm going to use the Rosy Skin Triad. So we're going to use Rosy Shadow and Rosy Skin, and I'm going to use Creamy Ivory to create my highlight colors for that. And I'm going to do some trim on the base, on her clothing. She's got these little bits of piping, and we're going to do these with blue. Going to make them look like they're sort of silvered, shiny blue threads in her cloak. So we'll use Twilight Blue, Snow Shadow, and Pure White to make those little shiny bits. And what else do we need? I need to have a black on hand, so I'll have my Dragon Black there as well. Got those browns, got the skin tone. I think I need a darker color for the skin tone as well. So let's use, we haven't used Burgundy Wine in a while. Let's use Burgundy Wine. So we're going to use Burgundy Wine to create the shadow color for our skin tone. And got a little bit of hair showing underneath here. And where I'm going to do a nice brown cloak. She's going to have very fair skin. I like these cheeks. We maybe should do some freckles on these cheeks. So let's give her some red hair and freckles. So I'll just use the red hair triad from Reaper, Auburn Shadow, Highlight Orange, and there's another one that I'm missing, but I don't remember what it's called. Carrot Top Red. It's going to be, that color's probably here on the table somewhere. There it is. So we're going to give her brown cloak, fair skin, red hair, silver looking piping, and we'll work out what color the base will be a bit later on. So that's our overall plan for today. If you're following on Twitch and you want to join the conversation, there should be a link in the Twitch chat that you can use to go to the Discord channel. I will not be watching the Twitch channel. One of the moderators will. So you can post questions there, but I might not see them right away. If you do want to ask a specific question, please post it in the Discord chat, and I'll probably see that pretty much right away. Sorry, I missed you guys for the last one. We had a bit of a hurricane roll through up here, and we lost power several times that day. So it was, I think, for the best that we decided to put that class off. But the weather here is beautiful today, so we should have no problems, except that there was a public holiday here yesterday. So people who normally come to the studio on Saturdays are all coming today on Sunday. And that's one of the reasons I'm starting a little bit late. It's been non-stop stream of new customers and people coming through all day. And it's, so I you know me, I like to talk. So I spent more time talking with people than getting ready for the class. So that's why I'm a little bit disorganized and slow getting started. And if you hear whispering in the background, there's one of my friends is here chatting with people as well, just to help me out during the afternoon. So that's what you can hear in the background. All right, all good. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to start putting my browns onto my palette. And as usual, I'm going to start by having my darker colors on the left-hand side. And the reason for that is to just help me stay organized on my palette. So let's just adjust the camera just a touch. There we go. So I'm going to start with the darker colors on the left, and I'm going to work my way across, and that's so that I know where my lighter and darker paints are. Roger, could you throw me a new leather brown? That one just died. Thank you. It's the best part about having doing classes in a miniature shop. I can just grab paints off the shelf. There we go. Now we got brown. So that was the leather brown. This is going to be amber gold. And finally golden blonde. And that'll be our highest highlight color. And I'm going to try to make this a bit like a cloth. I'll see if we can have a little bit of texture on there as well. Now I feel like this might not be quite dark enough, so I might want to add some shadow to that later. So I'm going to put some blue on my palette as well. and some black, so I can make a darker mix of that brown if I need it. What's going on with the paints today? Nothing wants to cooperate. There we go. And a little bit of black. Shouldn't need too much black for this project. Put my white a little bit further over. And skin tones. That's going to happen almost right away, so we'll put the skin tones in there. So there's my burgundy wine. And rosy shadow we'll start with. It's a funny day. It feels like all the paints are finally getting fed up with me. In the last week, I've replaced about a half a dozen paints on the table. And so far today, I think that's 3 paints that have run out on me. Alright, so there's our skin tone colors. And we're going to, let's get our red for our hair color on there now as well. So that's auburn shadow, carrot top red, and a little bit of highlight orange. We don't need very much for this. Just a very small amount of hair showing. Right, that's probably 10 times too much paint right there. But that is the way it goes. Okay, we got all our paint. We're ready to go. So, I'm going to take my earth brown color here. And as usual, I'm not going to just paint directly from my puddle. Or my reservoir of paint. I'm going to pull some off to the side, work it a bit with a brush to load the brush, roll the brush to get a nice point on there. If I feel like I have too much paint on there, I might just dab a little bit excess off on the paper towel. And now I can start and get the base coat on. So, what am I going to be painting the base coat? All of her robes are going to get the same base coat, and we're going to separate the different materials or the different pieces of cloth with a bit of a dark lining effect later on. So I'm going to just start at the top, on the top of her head, and I'm going to work my way from the top down, putting on this coat of paint. Now you'll notice I didn't thin the paint with water or anything like that. These Reaper paints straight out of the bottle are fairly thin. We don't need to thin them any further for this. And we're going to do basically 2 smooth coats of this color, and that's going to be our base coat. So we'll just start from the top and pull downwards. I just noticed she's got that scarf on there. I always forget she's got that cool scarf. We'll have to figure out what color we'll do the scarf later. Now my Bones figure here had a few casting defects on it. So she's got this cross pattern on her chest, and there was one of those on the pouch there, but it was kind of damaged, and the one on this arm was damaged as well. So yesterday when I was getting the mini ready, I carved those off. So my figure that I'm working on doesn't have those little stylized cross shapes. So it may look a little bit different from your figure. So my options were either remove them or spend some time rebuilding them with green stuff or putty or something like that to give them their shape back. And I just decided to trim them off. Normally I would paint them up as silver or gold or something like that on this figure. But I think I want her to look a little bit simpler this time. She normally, I do her in bright blue robes or green robes or something like that. But today she's getting simple brown robes with a leather belt and that sort of thing. This is the plan. So always working from the top down, and when I put on a big blob of paint, I'm going to keep working the edge of that wet area of paint to spread the paint down. So I'm not necessarily painting on a coat of thinned paint, but what I am doing is the paint that I apply, I'm working it to smooth it out, and it'll end up being a fairly thin layer by the time I'm done. So that's where you're going to see like some patchiness in that color showing through, even though the paint is unthinned. But what we'll do is we'll go back and do a second complete coat of this paint, and that'll give us nice complete brown coverage. And then we are going to highlight over that. We're going to do some nice strong directional lighting, and at the end we're going to go back and glaze to blend those highlights and that patchiness that you might see a little bit of that after the second coat, but it'll disappear when we do the highlighting and the glazing at the end. Now I do have, like I say, there are customers here in the studio, so at some point I'm going to have to go and chat with these folks. And when I do, I'll mute the microphone, but I'll do my best to come back fairly quickly. So don't abandon hope. I haven't left or anything like that. And if worst comes to worst, I'll grab a hold of Roger back there and make him paint on camera, and he can teach the class. He's right now experiencing a moment of stage fright, and I'm pretty sure he just said something threatening to me. But
Panic.
a moment of panic. There you go. He says panic. Yeah. Okay, so we're just going to keep going now, and we'll finish these two. First coat of brown, and then we're going to do a coat of the skin tone. And we'll give that a moment to dry. And while that's drying, I'm going to go and chat with these folks briefly and then come back. Okay, so quick round of skin tone. And the areas that need the skin tone are going to be her hands and her face. So what we're going to do is grab a little bit of the rosy skin shadow, and I'm going to add some burgundy wine to it to make my shadow color for my skin tone. Now, one of the things you can do to make the skin smoother at the start, particularly sometimes Bones figures will have like you can see a little bit of it there. There's a bit of shredded plastic. And sometimes it's on the hands or it's on the face. What you can do is add a bit of Reaper's brush on sealer. Where's the brush on sealer? We usually have buckets of it here. There we go. You can add some brush on sealer into that paint, and that'll help give you an initial smooth first coat of paint. And if there's like a little bit of damage, it can fill that in and make things smoother. My model's looking pretty good. I don't need to do that, but that's often something I would consider at this stage. So now with that mix of slightly darker skin tone, I'm going to be aiming to paint into the edge of her hairline. So this becomes the shadow color under the hair, as well as the shadow on the skin tone. And I'm going to paint her eye sockets, her chin, right down into the edge of that scarf, eye sockets on both sides. And now you do want to be careful at this stage not to fill the eye socket with thick paint, where people are learning often to paint with the unthinned paint. They put on this layer too thick. So just put a thin layer of paint on and let it dry. Once it's on there, don't touch it again. You really need to let it dry. This is where when you work the paint for too long as it's drying, you can tend to tear up chunks of partly dried paint. And often when you're learning to paint, you take photographs and you zoom right in on your minis, you see those rough chunks in the paint. That's where you've worked the paint for too long and it started to dry. And as you kept working it, it tears the paint apart. And then it flips over like little bits of slate. And those little bits are what you're seeing there, those flipped over and folded over chunks of paint. So try to put on that first paint layer on the skin and let it fully dry before doing a second layer. And that'll help make things smoother. Okay, there we go. So as we go along, if you do have questions, I encourage you to ask. Feel free to chat with me. I always enjoy these classes more when somebody is asking me questions as we go, so don't hesitate. Okay, so we're going to do a second coat of brown and a second second coat of brown. So I'll do the same thing again. I'm going to start at the top of her head and work my way down. Just go smoothly. You can see almost right away with that second relatively thin coat that it gives us really good coverage. The black patchiness is starting to disappear. The other thing I'm noticing is, like, quite often I go to start breaking in a new brush and the brush really fights with me. And anybody who watched the last season knows that it took me like 6 months to get that Winsor & Newton brush to break in. And here it is right here. Oh, no, it's this one. And it already doesn't keep a tip anymore. But this one is broken in already, and it's beautiful. And, every brush is different. Sometimes they break in really quickly. Sometimes they take forever. Sometimes they only last a few weeks, and then the center hair breaks out of them, and they're not much good. Sometimes they last for years. It can be a bit hit or miss. But definitely still worth the money. They still last longer than the synthetic brushes do by far. All right, get our second coat tying down there. Okay, excuse me just for 1 sec. Everybody's awfully quiet out there. I know you're out there. It shows me that you're there. So if you do have questions, don't hesitate. It was far too quiet here yesterday because of the holiday. There was nobody in the studio the whole day. And didn't get to talk. Usually on Saturdays I spend the whole day talking about painting. But I didn't get to do as much of that yesterday as I wanted to. Alright, I think all the spots that I missed have been covered over now. Oh, I forgot her whole apron at the front. And I just grabbed the wrong color paint. I don't know if you can see that. I grabbed blue by mistake. Ah, it feels like a Tuesday. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. If you have suggestions for what color you would like to see that that scarf painted, we might paint the scarf and her little belt here like they're pieces of cloth. And if you have a suggestion for what color you'd like to see that be, just let me know, and we can incorporate it into our paint scheme. So we'll let that dry, and now we're going to do another coat of paint on the skin. So what I'm doing is I'm adding just a bit more of the rosy skin shadow onto the into the mix to lighten it up just a little bit, but I'm still using this really dark color, and I'm going to repaint her hands and her face. Now in this case, we now need to start thinking about which way our light is coming from. Our light's coming down this way, so we want to make sure that we get this slightly lighter color. We're going to focus on her forehead, on the bridge of her nose, the tops of her cheeks. We don't want to fill the eye sockets with this color like we did the previous color. And on the side of her nose, away from the light source, we don't want to paint that side of her nose this color if we can avoid it. And this is often where people start to rework the paint too much and get that effect that I was talking about earlier with the big chunks of paint flipping over. So just kind of do a one highlight with this color, and then work your way along the wet edge of it. Let it dry. Keep going. Now just keep in mind as well that we're going to be doing much lighter highlight colors on here as well. So don't worry if it feels like it's too dark of a color at this stage. This is giving us our foundation for our lighter colors yet to come. Okay, we're going to let that dry for a moment. I shall be right back. All right. Well, I'm feeling very happy right now because somebody bought a troll that we painted a number of years ago. And it's beautiful. It's a Reaper green troll with like a shield and spikes all over. It's an awesome figure. And a lot of people have looked over the years. And he never found his forever home until just today. So I'm just feeling kind of glad that the troll finally found the home that it was meant to go to. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, I don't know, he didn't speak to people, but he found a new home today. So, yes, I'm happy. All right, I'm going to grab some rosy skin now, just a straight rosy skin, not mixed with the burgundy wine. And we're going to do one layer of highlight now on the skin tone. Focus on the same spots, the forehead, bridge of the nose, upper parts of the cheeks, upper lip, the chin, okay, and we're going to let that dry a little bit. Same thing on the hand. just focusing on the back of the hand. This figure has a really beautifully sculpted hands, really clear knuckles, and okay, give me just a sec, I'm going to sneeze. I'll not sneeze on camera, just to thanks very much, guys. Okay, so this is our basic skin tone now has been applied. And we'll let that dry for a while before we do any more highlighting on that. Now, we're going to do this brown rope. So I'm going to take my earth brown and I'm going to mix a bunch of leather brown into it, make it like an intermediate step. And my idea here is that we're going to do the larger shapes first with this slightly lighter color. And then we're going to do some texturing and some cuts and scratches on the shapes of the cloth with the lighter colors. And we'll see how that looks. So with my light coming down from this direction, I really want to make sure that my highlights are facing towards the light. So what I usually do is I rotate the model and figure out, okay, which way is my light shining on her? And in this case, I think my light is going to be coming kind of from that sort of direction and from that angle. So the camera right now, there we go. The camera is now looking at the model directly from the light direction. So it's a bit more like that is my light direction. Okay, so, and then I know that the edge of the hood is kind of lined up with that corner of the arm, so I can go back and look at the model every once in a while to see where the light would be hitting. Now, basically everywhere that I can see is going to get highlighted with this first step. And let's look at her from the other direction. Now, this is opposite the light. So this side of the model, she's not really going to get hit by much light from this direction. This is going to be our shadow side. So we don't paint this color on the shadow side. So let's get started. We'll start at the top of her head, orient her back towards the camera and the light. And what we're going to do, I'm just going to have to zoom out a little bit. There we go. Start highlighting away from the light. Wrong. Towards the light. There she is. So as I look at the top of her head, the light's going to hit up here. It's going to hit this whole side along here. So my brush strokes are going to pull the lighter paint from the shadow side towards the light side. So she's lit this way, so my brush strokes go from the shadow up towards the light. Why do we do it that way? Because we just create like a little wedge shape of paint that is lighter in one spot. It's basically like a blend. Okay, so let's see. We've got our base here. If I just put dabs of paint on there, doesn't really do much for us. But what I can do instead is if I want this side of the model to be lighter and that side to be darker, I can pull from the shadow side towards the light with successive brush strokes. I end up creating this effect where there's less paint on this edge and more paint on that edge. And as we do this successively through all of our layers, we end up with our brightest highlights wherever the brush is being lifted off the model. Okay, and then that lets us have very bright highlights. And if I need to, say, paint the top of an arm, I can come from two opposite directions and pull the paint so that it overlaps in the middle, giving me a zone with less paint, a zone with less paint, and a strong highlight in the middle. And we're going to do that repeatedly as we go. So now let's look at her from the light side again. So the top of this arm is going to have lots of paint on it. So let's start from down towards the shadow and pull towards the light. So we're going to pull upwards on this arm to create our highlight. And this upper part of the arm we know is visible because we checked it when we looked at our model through our light source. There we go. Let's look it through there again. There we go. See that arm is visible. This upper part of her leather armor plate thing here and her robe is visible at the top. We do our brush strokes pulling upwards. It's suddenly gotten very quiet in the studio. All the customers have left. There's no conversations happening anymore. Just me talking to myself. Okay, so this cloak, the same idea. We can kind of highlight the top of it here. And keep moving the paint in the general direction of the light source. As well. So there's our light. So this whole side of the model is going to be catching that light. Now, some of you are probably saying to yourself, well, that means that like a whole half of the model didn't get any highlighting, and that's correct. What that does is it leaves us space to work if later we wanted to draw something like a backlighting glow effect, like maybe there's a campfire or something nearby. It gives us space to work to create those other more advanced effects. But for now, we just keep highlighting by pulling this lighter paint out of the shadows towards the light to create nice strong highlights. Look at it this way. Yeah, I think the light's going to catch all the way down to about there. I'll just keep that light coming across. Alright, there she is, with the light towards that direction. Now we're going to make another lighter mix. Grab some leather brown. Let's mix some of this amber gold into here. Make it lighter again. Mine is not quite dry everywhere, but it's looking pretty good. Keep working our way forward. So now our next highlight layer, we want it to be slightly smaller than the previous layer. Okay, and keep in mind our light is coming this way. So shapes like this, the light is gonna catch the upper part of them. So that's where we want to focus. I don't know if you can see that, but this fruit fly that's decided to walk around is really annoying. So we're focusing this lighter color. Think of it as an arrow pointing towards the light source. So come on, get off my hand. We point towards the light with our highlights. And we're going to go quite light with this. It's going to be quite a strong light highlight. Applying the same principle, keeping our brush strokes going so that we're pulling the lighter paint towards the light. Fruit fly has decided to walk around in the paint palette instead. Alright. So now on these folds of cloth, apply the same idea. But I really want to catch kind of the center of them pointing towards the light, so that we sort of reveal their shapes. Same thing on the other arm. But this time the highlight should be quite a bit smaller than we did in the first run. So each of these highlights should fit inside the previous highlight. Because this is the arm which is sort of away from the light source, so these highlights are going to be quite a bit smaller than what we did over here. These ones are smaller, these ones are going to be much bigger. We end up with a big shadow down there, which is away from our light. So let's look at the model through our light. Pretty much everything we can see on the front that should be light is. These areas down here still need to be lit up. So let's do that. Still employing the same idea that the brush strokes go towards the light. And it takes a bit of practice to get used to sort of reading the shape of the model and deciding where the highlight should start and stop. Generally speaking, if the light can hit it directly, it should get highlighted. In this case, our light source, I think we're underground here. So our light source could be a magical light or a torch or something like that. It's going to be a point light source somewhere out here. So we don't have to think about it like being as intense as the sun. I think it's more likely to be like a magic spell or something like that. She's in the dungeon, she's adventuring, and she's some sort of creature is coming out of the shadows, and she's looking at it with her sort of sideways. Oh yeah, come over here. I got some holy water for you. Mummy or something. Okay. So I've got a pretty good general idea of our light showing. And I'm not sure why the top of her head doesn't look as... Oh, it's because of the shadow of the camera is hitting it. That's all. There we go. Alright. So we'll let this dry for a little while and let's do some more work on the skin. So I'm going to grab some rosy skin tone now. And I'm going to add that to a mix of... I'm going to add that to the rosy shadow. I feel like the jump in value between the rosy shadow and the rosy skin is a little bit too high. So I like to do a half step between the two first. Mix them 50-50 to do a highlight. And then after that we'll do another highlight with the rosy skin tone without anything mixed into it. So we're going to focus on the highlight, on the forehead. We want the bit of light focus in the center of her face, center of the nose. We'll put little dots on each side of her nose. Top of that cheek. Give her a nice round cheek, upper lip, sort of above her upper lip, and under that opposite cheek. There we go. And do a little bit of highlighting on her hand. And the hand holding the little phylactery. Or holy water, or whatever that is. Focusing on the side towards the light source. So like, for example, on her thumb here, right? I'm not painting the whole thumb this color. Just the side of the thumb that points towards the light. The side of that finger that points back towards the light. I'm painting the palm of her hand, but not the back of her hand. So she's got quite a dark shadow on the back, but the top of her hand is painted quite light. Okay, now we need to do something about those eyes. So I think we're going to give her the two-step eye, which means we're going to fill the eye socket with a dark color. So I'm going to mix some burgundy wine and some black to make quite a dark color. And we're going to fill the eye sockets with this color. And this is going to form the outline of the eye as well as the iris. And we will then paint the whites of the eyes afterwards. So you want to get your best brush and just paint a little dark oval in the eye socket. Now the way I like to do this is line up the brush and then dab in that eye socket. I think we want to do her lips as well. There we go. So now she's got those features painted. And I'm going to paint the outline of her hair now as well, so I can see where it is. Give me some bit of a guidance as to where to point the brush. So I'm going to grab some burgundy wine and my auburn orange or auburn red color. Make it a little bit darker. Why am I doing that? Because I've used quite a dark color as the base for her skin, and I want the shadow of the hair to be at least darker than the skin tone. And then I'm going to paint underneath the edge of this hood. Focus is not the greatest, is it? Why is that being so uncooperative? There we go. I'm going to paint under the edge of her hood and along the edge of her hairline with this color. Now I don't want to get this on the robe because I've already painted that, but I'm not too worried about getting this on her scarf. Now if I get a little bit of this on her cheek as well, it's okay because I can clean that up in a few minutes when we do the rest of the skin tone. But so there, now we've got her red hair framing around her face a little bit. And I feel like this would be a good color for her eyebrows as well. So if you feel up to it, get a good point on your brush and paint a line along her brow on each side to be her eyebrows in this dark red color. There we go. So now she's got eyebrows. Her eye sockets are dark. Starting to look good. And now we are going to paint the whites of her eyes on the side opposite from the direction she's looking. So the first step was to darken the eye socket. The second step is to paint the whites of the eyes. Okay, so we're going to do the whites of the eyes now. And the color I'm going to use for that, I'm going to use the off-white. What was this color that I picked? Creamy ivory. When you paint eyes, you don't necessarily need the smallest brush, but a brush which has a really good tip is essential. A nice pointy brush. And effectively what I'm going to do is try to paint a tiny white dot in the corner of her eye, okay, to be the whites of the eyes. And she's going to be looking towards the light, which is over this way. So I'm going to put these dots in the opposite corner from the direction she's looking. And that leaves it looking like her iris. Okay, so there's one. I'll do the other one. So she's looking off to the side quite sharply. There we go. So now she's got the whites of her eyes and she's looking in this direction. And then her expression says, "Oh yeah? Come on, monster, I got something for you." Alright, so we're going to do some more highlighting with just straight rosy skin. And we'll focus that on the same spots again. A little bit in the middle of her forehead. And this is what I was talking about before. If we made a mistake with painting the eyebrows or whatever, we could clean it up now. Make sure we give her a highlight on her cheek, tip of her nose, all those good spots. My mini's a little bit miscast, so her right cheek, her left cheek, the right from our perspective, is a little bit sunken in. So it makes it a little bit harder to give that idea that she's got a round cheek. There we go. And we're going to let that dry for a moment, and we're going to put similar colored highlights on the back of her hand. Oh, sorry, didn't realize I was off screen. There we go. Back of the hand. There we go. Side of the fingers, palm of the hand, all that good stuff. There we go. Now, I said we would do some freckles. So now is when we do the freckles. I'm going to grab some Carrot Top Orange paint, I think is the color for this today. There's our orange paint. And I'm going to mix this with rosy skin. That's going to give us a slightly oranger version of rosy skin. There we go. And now, the same way as I painted those tiny little dots in her eyes, I'm going to put little dots on her cheeks. Maybe 3 or 4 on each side. And these are the freckles. A few little... Oh, that really does not show up on that camera. Just about see them. Okay, just visible in the corners. And sometimes I make them and I make them too light, sometimes I make them too dark. I feel like these ones are too light, so I'm going to grab some auburn shadow, and I'm going to thin this auburn shadow just a little bit to make it flow a little bit better for me. And then I'm going to do the same thing again, but I'm just going to put just a couple of little dots in her cheek as the freckles. Now, if you feel like they're too strong or they're too big, don't worry, because you've still got all your skin tone on your palette. You can always go back and cover it. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to glaze over it, actually. And because the paint is all semi-translucent, these freckles are going to show through the glazing that we're going to do here in a second. Okay, so now we've got some freckles on her cheeks. And now we're going to keep highlighting her face over top of what we just did. So I'm going to take some rosy skin, mix in some of that lighter color, the creamy ivory, and I am going to thin this just a touch. And I'm going to put more highlights of this color over top of what I just did. And these bright orange flecks in her cheek are going to be suppressed a little bit, but they'll still be present there on her face underneath this paint. Just lightly glaze over that with a little bit of this paint. Top of the cheeks. Being careful not to flood the eye socket. There we go. So those freckles just show through that skin a little bit. And she's looking off to the side towards her target for her holy oil or whatever she's going to throw. Now, let's give her some red hair. We started out with a mix of auburn and burgundy wine. So let's just grab auburn red. And we'll highlight the shapes of her hair with this auburn red. So that means this lock of hair just showing out from under the edge of the hood. Now we already put some skin tone on there. So try not to completely cover the skin tone. Let the skin tone show through. Because at the edge of a hairline, you tend to be able to see the skin color showing through. And there's a little bit of hair at the bottom left side of her hood as well. There we go. And now we want to highlight that with the carrot top red. And then we're going to do a little bit of highlight orange on it as well. Now, I'm not going to try to highlight her eyebrows. The eyebrows are good enough, already done that color. We'll just focus on this little bit of hair, which is really showing through underneath the hood. Okay, there we go. And now with the carrot top red, the same thing, or what's this color called? Highlight orange. Highlight orange. A few little fine stripes of that. And I want to focus these in the center of that lock of hair on her forehead. Same way as we've been highlighting the middle of her forehead, we'll bring the focus into the center of her face. Just a few of these little bits, give a little bit of a highlight. A little bit along the edge of her face, just to frame her face a little bit. And that one little lock, it's a little ding of it. Now, is that light enough? No. We'll get a big, now take our creamy ivory from down below, and we're going to do one lighter highlight by mixing 50-50 creamy ivory with orange highlight. We'll do one more little highlight focused in the center. And try to just do like one bit of hair at a time. Just little tiny highlights where little glints of light would catch on the edge of her hair. There we go. So now we've got a rather angry looking girl who's looking askance to the side of that undead that's crawling out of its tomb, and she's thinking, I'm going to throw this vial of holy oil on you. This is her plan. All right. Now, I feel like we're finished on the skin tone for the most part, but it doesn't really have much in the way of color in her face. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a little bit of red in her skin. Let's grab, what kind of color could we use for that? Let's use clear red. That's a bit too strong. All right, let's use blood red. I'm going to grab some blood red and put a little bit of that on my palette. Maybe. This paint's looking a little bit dried up. Put a bit of that on the palette over here by the reds. Oh, way too much. Way too much paint. I guess she's getting a red scarf, whether we like it or not. Now, I'm going to take a daub of that red, and I'm going to mix it in with the skin tone. So grab some rosy skin and rosy skin shadow. Mix those all together to make a darker version of it, which is a little bit redder. And I'm going to glaze this color into her, onto her cheeks. So a little bit of this color. Add a little bit of water to it, not too much water, just a touch. And what I'm going to do is the same thing as I was showing you earlier with that little base, right? Same idea. We're going to take this thin paint and we're going to push it across her face, and then so it's going to go across her face and then under her hairline, like that. And that's going to just a little like that, and then from, so that would be where her hair is. I'll do the same thing under the other cheek, so like that. So we get not much paint by her nose, more paint under the hairline to the side. So you want to use a fairly fine brush for this. Good point on it. You don't need much paint on the brush. I'm just going to push a little tiny bit of paint like that. So little you can barely see it on my finger. Okay, but it's there. And we'll do that on the sides of her face to give her face a little bit more color. So I'm going to do it in there. I'll push it along the bottom of that cheek. And on the other side as well. Now I turn the model around to get better access right along the bottom of that cheek. Didn't really work the way I was hoping, or I was planning. Might have a little bit too much water in the paint. So now her cheeks have turned kind of rosy. It's not really what I had in mind. Doesn't look too bad though. Okay, I'm going to put a little bit of this color on the back of her hand as well on the shadow side. And down in there, around the knuckles. Basically anywhere I feel like there was not enough color in the skin tone. Put in her nail bed, bottom of her hand. She has that really unfortunate mold line that goes along the back of her middle finger, makes that one finger look really big compared to the others. I kind of like that, maybe a little bit in on the inside of that hand. A little bit of a shadow. There we go. I'm pretty happy with that. She's got a little bit more skin color now. All right, let's keep going. Now, I want to do more highlighting on the brown. So I'm going to grab that color, what's that? Amber gold. I feel like the amber gold color needs to be added to some of the highlights. So like on this pocket, for example, I want the edge of that pocket to really stand out. So I put a little dot on that corner, work my brush along the edge and bring out that shape a little bit. And I want to do the same thing down here, down there, bring out that edge. And not just on the edge on this side, I'm going to bring that highlight a little bit further back across the pocket. Because with that shape, it's going to catch the light a bit. Just bring it out a little bit more. Same thing in here. I want to do that on the space above the pocket. And on the cloth around the pocket, but facing directly towards the light. Now this is going to be silver trim. That's going to be silver trim. I'm not too worried about highlighting those very much now. I do want to bring up the color of this pocket a bit. This little tabardy thing. The same thing on that bit of armor on her chest. Bring up the light on her shoulder because that's closest to the light source. This shoulder, this arm, and that side of her hood are closest to the light, so they should be the lightest points on the model. and they're also going to be bringing our attention towards her face. So we want those to be quite light to really guide our eyes inwards. There we go. And the same thing up on the top of the hood. A little bit of highlight up there. Top of this arm. There we go. And I feel like maybe we need to do a little bit of that in this zone in here as well, just so things look a little bit more balanced. I mean balance between this spot and this spot. They're getting the same effect of light, so they should be about the same value. They should be the same relative lightness. There we go. Now, I'm going to darken some of the shadows. And as it said earlier that I was going to do is going to take some of our brown. So this was the first brown that we base coated with. And I'm going to add some blue. Now this twilight blue I picked because it's almost the same value as the brown. It's not going to darken it that much. It's just really going to sort of cool it off. And typically when you look at a shadow with like the sun or a warm light source, the shadows tend towards blue. So by mixing blue in with the brown, we're giving a hint of a shadow color. And to make it a little bit darker, I can put a little bit of black in there. That'll lower the value without making it really turn into sort of a dirty color. This is what I'm looking for here. So I get this darker brown color now. And what I'm going to do with that is anywhere that I want there to be a deeper shadow, I'm going to put in a layer of that color. So for example, under her sleeve, the light coming this way is not going to get the inside of the sleeve. So I'm going to paint the inside of her sleeve that darker color. Let's look at this lower part of the sleeve on that side away from the light source. It's going to be a bit in shadow, so we can put a little bit of this color down at the bottom of that. In here between the book and her armpit, the light doesn't hit there directly. So we're just putting in a bit of this darker color anywhere that light would not hit her robes, specifically her robes, directly. And part of what I'm doing here is I'm doing a brush stroke to position the shadow. So here's our brown color. This was our highlight that we made before. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking the shadow color and I'm pushing the shadow color away. So here's our highlight, here's our base coat. I'm pushing the shadow color away from that into the shadows. And I can do that with this sort of a sideways movement of the brush. So as I consistently move the brush in the same direction, it will move the pigment off to the side, and I get more pigment at the tip than in the middle. That's not working very well. Let's load that brush up again. Let's try that again. There we go. So everywhere when we push the brush to the side, get that darker color from the tip. There, that gives you the effect much better. See, there is almost no paint, and there's a lot of paint. Okay, so we get that shadow effect, that blend effect with that sideways brush movement, and that's what we're trying to do. So anywhere that paint or the light doesn't shine directly, we're going to use that darker bluish brown. So for example, in here in the fold of the skirt, the light doesn't shine in there directly, so we darken that. On the back, same thing. Anywhere that the folds go in, we do a little bit of this darker color to deepen the shadow. Inside the sleeve, back of the hood, particularly these folds at the back of the hood. And usually people start asking me around now, why it's so dark? Well, we want the shadows to be quite dark so that we have a lot of contrast. The purpose of the contrast being to make your eye pick out certain things and to see shapes in certain ways. And if we want our eye to pick out that this is an area in darkness, we want to really make it as dark as possible. So that's why we're doing this. And the contrast part of it comes in that when we perceive certain areas as really dark, the opposite areas we perceive as being lighter. So we give the impression, that illusion of lighter areas by creating dark shadows. The shadows, in a sense, point towards the light. So we've got nice dark shadows there on the back. Clearly the light is shining on the model from up here somewhere. Same thing from the front perspective. But now what we need to do is blend all that together. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our earth brown and we're going to make a glaze of earth brown, and we're going to put that over top of everything we just painted. So I'm going to thin this down a little bit. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is the same way that I did this with that pushing and pulling brushstroke. We're going to take earth brown and we're going to put it over top of this. We're going to pull it from one direction first, like that. So this will be from the highlight down towards the shadow. And then we're going to pull from the shadow up towards the highlight. And we're going to leave these overlapping blobs of brown in our mid-tone sort of shadow, our mid-tone brown area. So what is that going to look like? So here I'll do it on the front first. So here's our highlight, and this color already is painted in right about there. So I'm going to start up here and I'm going to pull this brown across down towards the shadow. I'm going to pull it down across these surfaces down towards the shadow. And what's that going to do? It's going to tint everything back closer to this brown. But because this is a thinner coat of paint, our highlighting is going to show through. And now we end up with a smooth transition from light to dark. I'm going to do that again on this lower part of the cloak, or her robe. We'll start up here and we'll pull the paint downwards towards the shadow. Pulling down, pulling down, pulling down. Okay, always pulling it down. And then if we have our shadow area down here, then we made it too light. We can go from the shadow and pull back up towards the light. And this is going to give us this nice, smooth transition. So compare this area to this area. This has a smooth transition from dark brown to light brown. This area is rough. And this glaze that we've just done smooths out all of that, that highlighting. Gives us a nice blend. This is called a blending glaze. Do the same thing on this part of our armor up here now. I'm going to pull that from the highlight down towards the shadow. And these Reaper warm browns work particularly well for this technique. They really, really work well for beautiful paints. Some other browns it's more difficult, but these ones work really, really well for this. So it's a great set of colors to learn this with. Is Reaper's warm browns. The same thing here, pull down. And if certain areas get are not as dark, but you want them to be dark, you can just wait, let it dry, and then do that area again later. Don't try to do it again right away, because you could basically stir up the paint and make things look rough. So let them dry, and then try doing another layer of glaze to darken things out again. The difference between this out here, you still see all the highlights, versus this area in here. Same idea, pulling down to the shadow. And on this side, my shadow is really, really evident here. There's really dark shadow. So I'll show you what I'll do it from the other direction this time. I'll start in the shadow, but I'll pull upwards towards the light. And then I'll reverse it and pull from the highlight back down towards the shadow. But I'll overlap those dots in the line across here, where I already have that brown color present on the model, right in this line here. There we go. And as that dries, it'll darken and we'll get a nice smooth blend. I'll do that over the top of her hood. Pull down from the light to the shadow. Pull from the shadow back to the light. Now this part of our hood is a little bit more of a challenge, because we need to go across the top, right across the top, and then pull it back down into by her scarf there. And if we leave too much paint on there, we're going to get coffee stains. But we need to make sure we completely cover it and then pull it right down into the shadow and let it dry there. Okay. Same thing out here. We're going to do down this sleeve and pull it right down to the bottom. You can see here these blobs of paint. See these blobs? That's what I want to avoid having sitting out in the open. We want to position those on top of an area that was already that same color. Highlight to the shadow, pull from the shadow back up to the highlight, and leave those brown blobs right in the middle. I think we've got one last area left to blend, which is out here. You can really see the difference between this area, and this area. This looks nice and smooth. This looks pretty rough. So there we go. Anywhere you felt is too light, you can just do that again. Darken it down a little bit more, and now we've got Olivia looking the way she's supposed to look in her lovely brown robes. Now, I still need some suggestions for what color her scarf should be. Hi, Aaron. Aaron has posted a hello. All right, let's keep going. So we're going to do the piping or the trim bits in a sort of a silver non-metallic effect. Oh, somebody has a suggestion, finally. So let's take some of that black. We're going to mix it with our twilight blue. Oh, a vote for light green. Interesting. Interesting. I have to think about that one. How would light green look? You know what? Light green with her red hair could look pretty cool. All right, so what I'm going to start by doing is I'm going to mix some dragon black with twilight blue. And this is going to be the base coat for all of that piping effect that we're doing. So I'm going to start on her sleeve right here, the most easily accessed one. Start at the top, and we're going to put a line. We're going to paint that whole shape this color. And create a dark line of trim. Now, where else are we going to put this color? It's going to go on this trim around her little apron. There we go. Along there. So we did that square shape on the apron. I'm going to do this little bit of trim around the outside of this. I think this is like the chest piece of the armor is up there. Maybe where her name is Olivia, we can give her an olive green scarf. Is that too cliche? And there's a bit of trim on the other sleeve. We'll get the same color. Do that on both sides. Make sure we get it on top as well. Goes right through there. Now, I said earlier that I had trimmed off all of the crosses and things that were on her. If you still got those on your model, this is not a bad color to paint all of those things. So like this little cross on her chest could be the same color. I'm going to do that on this one though. Now her skirt has a bit of trim on it as well. We're going to paint this color. So this is the shadow color of our silver trim that we're going to put on this little bit of stuff on her robe. So we're painting the shadow color first. Trying to figure out the other day how many times have I painted this particular mini, and Olivia was the first mini I ever used to teach a painting class, and that was about 6 years ago I think, and I've used her for dozens of classes since then, so it's quite possible that I've painted this mini maybe 20 or 25 times. I'm not sure. It's a lot, though. Okay. She's got these funky leather things on her wrists as well. I'm not sure what those are, whether they're armor or who knows what. We might make them a different color later. I don't know. We'll think about that. Okay. So next what we're going to do, we're going to switch back to twilight blue, just straight twilight blue, nothing mixed into it. This tends to be quite a thin paint, but what we're going to do is anywhere that there's a curve, we're going to paint this blue on the outside of the curve. So like this bit on this side of her chest has an outward curve, so we're going to pull together like a blob of this twilight blue at the outside edge of that curve facing towards our light source. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, but on the other side, because of the angle of the light, this blob of color needs to be higher up. And then we're going to do the same thing on her sleeve. Both sides. outside of this trim. Along there and along there. Now, you don't have to do this everywhere. Just do it on the spots where there's this outside rounded curve. And that'll give the illusion that it's shiny. And if you miss a spot, your brain will kind of fill in that it's reflecting something or whatever. You can always go back and add more detail later if you want, but you don't really need to. And anywhere that the paint was too thin, the brown is going to show through. And that's okay because this would be reflecting that brown, and its shape is going to show up in the reflections anyway. Or its color is going to show up in those reflections. Here we go. Now, take some twilight blue and mix in some snow shadow. And this is going to be our next highlight color. We'll do 3 more highlight colors. This mixture of snow shadow, straight snow shadow, and then we're going to mix some pure white into the snow shadow for the final highlight. Alright, so now we're going to go back to all the same spots and do the same highlight in the same position, but smaller and tighter. And the tighter you can make these, the shinier this trim will appear to be. So across the front here, I'm not going to go all the way across. I'm going to start about halfway and pull in towards the edge. Opposite sleeve, side of her chest. Edges of those little curves. This weird little arrow thing on her back. Want to concentrate those areas of lighter color pointing towards the light source where possible, because it's the light source which is what's being reflected, making them look shiny. Okay, that's not bad. Let's grab some straight snow shadow now and do those highlights again. And you guessed it, even smaller than before. So do one on the sleeve. There we go. Now, the final touch to make those look a little bit shiny. We can take some of our pure white, mix that in with the snow shadow. Yep, we're going to do all those again, even smaller. And start to look a little bit shiny. There we go. Shiny reflective spots. There we go. I don't know, I'm pretty happy with that. She's looking pretty good now. So we had a vote for a green scarf. So we could do a green scarf and a green belt. We might as well do that. So we're going to take, let's use green liner. My favorite green. I'm going to use green liner and jade green, I think. I don't know why, but I like jade green lately. So I'll put the top of each of those on there. So we're going to start out by painting the whole thing green liner. Which is a very, very dark blue-green, almost like black. And we're going to paint the scarf and her belt. Now be very careful not to paint her hair and her face with this color, because the green liner is really dark, and if it gets on there and dries, it'll be really hard to clean up. We really only need one coat of this paint, because we want it to end up being a fairly light green. So this is effectively our shadow color on our light green scarf. So we really only need to do this once, and then we'll start highlighting with the lighter. We're going to mix the jade green into it to make a lighter color. Don't forget the little bit of belt that shows at the back. And the belt at the front. I feel like this could be a druid character, a wizard character. This figure is quite versatile. I don't know why, but I just felt the sudden need to paint the cover of this book with this dark green color. In my mind, I'd been planning to paint it red, but I've clearly changed my mind. Oh no, I know why I'm doing that. It's because when I put the red over it, the reds can look really, really dark. And that's what I'm interested in. Alright, so we've got a green belt and a green scarf. Now, Let's make a mix of jade green and green liner. A little bit more green, a little bit more jade green than green liner. And that'll be our first highlight color. Now we still have to remember which way our light is shining. Our light is shining this way. So we want our highlights to be closer to her left side, the right side of the model from our perspective. So our brush strokes should go along those shapes towards the right, but I don't want to completely cover them. I want to leave some of that green liner showing at the bottom and right at the top. And that way we won't have to go back and edge or a dark line close to her face, because we will have already have left a bit of shadow there. This makes things a little bit less risky for us. So let's do same thing on the back. Highlight the folds of the cloth. Nice tiny little brush strokes. Always keeping the same thing in mind, that I'm painting a lighter paint over a dark paint. So my brush strokes should go from the shadow towards the light, if at all possible. Sometimes it's not possible, just because of the angle, but generally speaking, that's what we want to try to do. Okay, so we've got a little bit of shadow still showing at the top and the bottom. And we do the same thing on the belt. Oh, my eyes are getting pretty tired already. Still suffering a bit of jet lag. I just got back from a week-long trip to Ireland. I was over there visiting my kid. She's at school in Trinity College in Dublin this year. Not that we're proud of her or anything. So yeah, over there for a week. Got rained on the whole time. Very tiring. Still haven't quite gotten caught up on my sleep. Okay, there we go. So now we've got a green belt and a green scarf, but we wanted light green. So we're going to take this jade green and we'll do a jade green highlight now. And that'll give us our light green color. But that won't really be light enough. So what we're going to do is we'll end up mixing a color into the jade green to make an even lighter highlight. Now, there's a couple of approaches we could take here. We could take the same color that we were using to highlight the brown robe, which was golden blonde. And we could use that to highlight the green, and that'll sort of tie the green and the brown together because they'll have a common highlight color. Or we could take the color we used to highlight the skin, which was creamy ivory. Add that to the jade green to create our highlight color, and that'll give the jade green a similar value to the skin tone. And we want the focus to be on her face and on the skin, so that might not be a bad idea. The other thing we could do is we could highlight this one with the same thing as we used for the robe, and highlight the scarf by her face the same color we used for the skin. And that'll give us two different effects. So let's try that. Let's do some yellow and jade green. Now the jade green is a cold green, so it's going to look a bit weird with this amber gold mixed into it. So it'll lighten it a little bit, and it'll warm it up a bit, and that'll give us a nice highlight. But it's not going to be as light as the highlight that we'll be making near her face. So let's try that along the side of this little scarf, or the belt. So we'll highlight the belt first with this amber gold mixed with jade green. I did say amber gold. Originally I said I was going to highlight it with golden blonde, but I realized that that would be too light. So we'll just do a little bit of that amber gold on that belt. And then we'll do the green on the scarf with a bit of the color we used to highlight her face, which was this mix of rosy skin and what was that color called? Creamy ivory. So this will be a lighter highlight color than what we used on the belt, and that might help keep the focus towards her face. I'll do the same thing with all these highlights. The brush direction always goes towards the light source. I like that. That seems to be doing what I intended, which is keeping a little bit more of the attention towards her face than towards her waist. Highlight on the back, not as much as we did on the front, just a little bit on the sides and the back. There we go. There she is. Now, what else do we need to do on her? I think we need to do a little bit of dark lining on the brown robe. And then I'm probably going to call it there for today. My eyes are getting very tired. And what I'm going to... No, not quite there yet. I'm going to do the book, I think, first. And then I'll call it. So let's do some burgundy wine, first of all, on the book cover, which I already painted dark green. So that's going to really change the color of this burgundy wine to an odd kind of dark purple color. Like that. And we'll put some of that on the strap that goes over her shoulder. So this is the book strap. Now, the risk in painting the strap red is that the red will just completely take over from that brown robe. So we don't want this to be super saturated, bright red, but I do want it to be visible. I'm going to paint that little water bottle the same color. So the red on the water bottle it looks different than the red painted on the book over the green. And I think that strap, it does. The strap goes on the back as well. So I'm going to paint a little bit of that red on the strap at the back too. Sorry, the burgundy wine on the back. There we go. Now, we're going to desaturate that by adding some skin tone. Let's use some rosy skin. And we're going to add that to our burgundy wine color again. And I don't want it to be totally like the same color as her skin, so I'm going to throw some orange in there. Not for any particular reason, just to make it different. Yeah, I like that. Give it a sort of a warm, leathery look. So we're going to pick out the shapes on the cover of the book by going from the shadow and working our way upwards, just to kind of pick out the different shapes on the book. So we get both covers. And we want to paint the strap like this. Now, if you were really feeling keen, you could put a leather texture on that strap, which would be cool. But you don't have to if you don't want to. But we need to go one layer lighter. So I'm going to add some more rosy skin tone to that. A little bit more orange to that. Oops, I flooded my palette. Oh well. Start again over here. Bit of orange. That's kind of what I'm looking for. Something like this muddy orange color. That's going to be the highlighting for my leather strap. And for my cover of my book. Totally flooded the palette with that paint. So it's become very thin because it's full of water. So it really wasn't going to be usable. So I basically just had to make a new mix, start all over again. Not a big deal. There we go, the book strap's quite visible. What we need to do now is paint the pages of the book. So I'm going to grab amber gold and maybe mix a little bit of snow shadow with it, kind of neutralize it a bit. Gives it a sort of a greenish gray cast. And that's going to be the color of my book pages. And I'm just going to do a bunch of lines in there to hint at the book pages. And underneath as well. There. We've got the hint of a book. Now, I'm going to do a bit of dark lining. So I'm going to pick out the black paint. I'm going to add a little bit of burgundy wine to it. And I'm going to add a little bit of brown to it. This is going to be my dark line color. I want a color which is much darker than everything around it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this color in long, thin lines in between anywhere two surfaces meet. So if you look at my hand, there's those dark lines in between my fingers. That's what I'm painting now, is those sort of lines. So I want a nice pointed brush, and I'm going to paint long, thin lines like this. Let's darken this up a little bit more. And do it like this. So anywhere two surfaces meet, we're going to do some thin lines. This is the plan, okay? So let's start with that fancy pocket. We know that we need a shadow at the top of the pocket. Do it all on there. we need to define the outside of the pocket as well. So a thin line, like that. This whole little apron thing needs a shadow around it. So just outline it like that. All of this piping needs a line around it. So really, everywhere that two surfaces meet, we are going to do this color. Those bracelets meet the skin. All of these spots. Now, I know this is like a beginner painting thing, but the earlier you start getting used to doing this sort of dark lining, the faster your brush control will develop, and you'll get very good at it very quickly. It doesn't take very long. And the payoff will be that later on, when you go to learn other techniques like, let's say, painting freehands, or painting tartan, or painting non-metallic metal, or one of those things where being able to control the value and place very sharp, precise lines is going to be useful. You'll be well prepared for it, and it'll be easier for you. So you'll be able to learn those techniques rather than learning how to dark line or how to do precision painting or whatever it is. So even if you're a beginner, I encourage you to start employing dark lining in all of your painting so that you get good at it quickly. And at first, your lines are going to be really thick. And you're going to be frustrated by them, and they're going to look really, really crude. But the more of them you do, the faster you get, and the more precise they will be. And they will help to make things look cleaner and crisper on your model very, very quickly. So, don't hesitate. Get your brush and start dark lining everything. Keep going. I'm not sure what to do next on this model. We've got a nice scarf, we've got nice skin, we've got a book, all kinds of little things on the go. We could do some metallic colors on her various accoutrements and her weapons and things. We could do a little freehand pattern on her scarf or something. I don't know. Let's do those little ceramic idol shapes. There's one on the ground down there. So I'm just going to paint that like, I basically just grabbed that burgundy wine color and put some gray in it, and we'll color it that. That's going to be the base color of our pottery. And we want to paint this a little bit carefully because we've already painted most of the model and we don't want to make a mess at this stage. Be careful not to cover her fingers over with this color like I just did. Go on the ground. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I think we need to give the stones on the ground sort of a gray-brown color. So let's mix some more snow shadow with brown and get a weird... Let's put a dab of green in there too for no reason. There we go. Now we've got like a weird yellowy gray. This will be our sandstone base color for our stones in the base. And we're just going to give them a light coat of this color. Now we want the base to show the same light direction. And our light focus is there. So we'll bring the color on the base around towards that light direction. Some sand going on down there. Let's paint the sand a slightly different color. Got a bit of a stone color on the go now. Let's make a darker version of that, and we'll paint that at the back as the shadow. So there's our light direction is this way. So I've just mixed some twilight blue into that same mix. So now I've got a darker stone color that's going to go on the back of the base. Now if you make a mess like I did, you can always just come back and fix it up. See, I got the paint on the bottom of the skirt. We can just push that off a little bit. Come back and touch that up in a minute. Let's get that darker paint color in there. At the back. There we go. So let's grab some amber gold and we'll put that into the mixture. Oh, and let's put some orange in there as well. I don't know, I'm into orange grays today. I don't really know why. Orange grays is going to be the color of our canopic jars or whatever these are. Let's put some dots of these colors on those jars on the side facing towards our light. So our light is coming this way. Let's just put some little dots on the jars so they look like the light is catching them from that side. Make sure you focus on the rims. Same thing down here on the little wolf-headed guy. Give him kind of a stippled look. Sandy jar guy. Don't really. All right, let's do a little more highlighting of our jars. Let's add some yellow into the mix. What did I grab? Amber gold. Same idea, just a little bit more highlighting along the edge of the things. You don't want them to dominate the scene or anything like that. They just need to be sort of defined shapes. So I'm trying to define the face and ears of this guy. Let's get that little lip on him. Dirty stippled highlight towards the light. Now again, we don't want this to dominate over the miniature itself, right? So we can just, we can kind of stop there actually. There she is. So, I mean, you make your own choices about what color you would want to do her wristbands. You can do a little bit more lighting on the base. I think we want the base to really be lit in the same direction as she is. Go a little bit lighter on the stone color. And keep highlighting the stones on the base towards the light. And I'm just kind of running the brush along the edge of them, putting little dots and dashes in, so there's a bit of a rough texture in addition to the natural sort of stony texture that's been sculpted onto these. It's kind of cool. But I'm building up the light. The lighter colors are being built up facing towards the same light source that I've painted on her. So that helps reinforce the illusion of where the light direction is shining on her. Slightly lighter colors. Just focusing on picking out the edges of shapes where they would catch the light. And that also helps so that if I darken the base any, these highlights on the edges of shapes should still show through. Help give some definition to those objects. Even if I was to say, like do an airbrush shade or something over top of it, these highlights would still show through that airbrushing. That's totally the wrong thing to have done, but whatever, it's done now. Do a little bit more even lighter colored. Just a few spots. Don't want it to be so light colored that it distracts from our main focal point, which is our girl's face here. There we go. Focus is not cooperating today. Get a little bit more of a highlight on the edge of that. There, I'm happy with that. Alright, so that's it for today. So we did the brown robe and how to blend the brown with a glazing blend. We did skin tone with 1-step or 2-step eyes. We did some freckles. Yeah. And there we go. Alright, if anybody has any questions, I'm going to stick around for a few minutes. And look forward to seeing you guys in the next time. The next one we're going to do is going to be, the Orc Archer, some green orc skin tones. That'll be fun. That'll be cool. All right, that's it for me.